To some other news now, and households have had the final nail in the coffin for interest rate cut hopes as inflation rises again. Joining me live is Deakin University economist Dr. Nataliya Ilyushina. Lovely to see you as always. Thanks for joining us. You were not surprised, right?
Not surprised at all. And anyone who called it a surprise, it's an absolute stretch, even though the news on the inflation were quite grim. The electricity subsidies have started to wind down last month, and we already saw that coming through in the current inflation figures. So the last month jump just continuing on into this month, coupling with overall lack of improvement in productivity that has been flagged for months now by both Reserve Bank governor and somewhat attempted to be addressed by the treasurer with the productivity roundtable that we still haven't heard from. But again, the main driver remains the winding down the electricity subsidy.
I mean, what will come as little surprise to most Australians, housing costs were the main driver of these price rises, electricity and rental costs the main culprits, of course. Some people in Australia questioning now Jim Chalmers and the government's approach to this.
Yes, absolutely. And the housing costs, especially rental costs, are blowing out, and partially blaming migration. And another problem is obviously on the housing supply. There is lengthy construction times, and as well as the problems with approvals. And as I mentioned, the population of Australia is not growing any slower. We just hit about 27 million recently, and we all need a place to live.
I mean, a lot of people are a bit wary to talk about immigration because immigration is a wonderful thing and has been a wonderful thing, as we know, for our country, but it also has to be balanced with what the country can afford, and housing is a major part of that. From your perspective, an economics perspective, what impact is migration having on Australia right now, and what's the threshold?
Absolutely. Migration is a powerful economic force for prosperity, but only when used appropriately. And while I somewhat sympathize with those who are concerned with mass migration, I would hold off calling the problem mass migration. I would call it excessive migration is a problem, and excessive in relation to the resources, infrastructure, and the housing that we have, but also mismatched migration. And that's what comes to the appropriate skill set that we require from our migrants to have. As we recently heard about the report from Skills Commission, where the focus was on the problems with so-called student visa stream, which I'm actually a product of, that brings excessive migration while they are students, and then following on becoming so-called Uber drivers with IT degree. While the program was well designed at a time when it first arrived, more than 10 years ago, even further than that. It was designed by Gary Hargrave back in the days. The idea was to allow skilled migrants to assimilate while they're studying. What is now becoming more and more obvious is that the pathway to permanent visa from the student visa, missing one important point. When a person gets a skilled visa based on their occupation, say they claim they are a plumber, an IT person, they don't have any requirement to work as such. So they join a ranks of as notoriously labeled Uber drivers, and that exacerbates both problems on both ends. On one hand, they add to the demand on the housing market, and on the other hand, they don't help with the supply, because what we really need is construction workers, plumbers, while the current migration system, especially the skilled migration, overemphasizes highly skilled individuals, and our economy can no longer handle them.
And that's the thing. It all comes back to the economy and what it can handle at the moment. Before we wrap things up, I want to get your thoughts. A little bit of a sidetrack here, but on Victoria's debt at the moment, it's out of control. It has been for a very long time. I just want to talk to you a little bit about this because some conversations that I've been having with a lot of my friends, they know people who cannot survive. Their businesses are shutting down. The hospitality sector, particularly, is struggling at the moment. You walk down the city and it's like a ghost town. The Premier seemingly in denial about all of this. The opposition leader, the new opposition leader, Jess Wilson, saying that this will be a priority for her. There were some stats out during the week where Jacinta Allen has spent $61 million on her ministerial staff. That's up 19% from Daniel Andrews when he was Premier. How can she justify that amount of money when the state is in a worse position? We saw that crime story just before we came to you too. Crime is up, police are struggling, we've got police officers shortages, businesses are struggling to thrive. From an economic perspective, it just doesn't add up, right?
Yes, it does not. And when I try to look at the budget papers, they're actually quite hard to read and hard to understand where things are going. And you correctly pointed out there are blowouts, and we do have a wage bill of 36.8 billion for the Victorian public servants alone. And when we start talking in billions, it's already hard to understand the extent of it. And that number is still expected to blow out by another 4 billion. And we had these machete bins that there were 13 million spent on that. And the question here is, why don't we possibly spend some money on promoting being a policeman so that these 2,000 jobs are filled? And why these excessive wages are not going into hiring more staff and more police officers, especially now that we are in a crime crisis. Another point about the Victorian budget, when you go on the website, there is a separate tab about addressing socioeconomic inequality of women. And the question is, if we're not addressing safety first, wouldn't it first impact women and their ability to even go to work?
Some good points there. And I mean, a lot of people in Victoria questioning the machete bin and just how much that costs. And obviously, it's not working. Nataliya, thanks for your time. As always, see you soon.
Thanks a lot.